Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the International Agenda here on the BJ Show. As always, I'm your host, Aidan Barry, and we will be on the show today. We will have NBA Playoff second round ties previews, NHL second round previews, and we will also have coverage of the NFL draft. So we'll get straight into the program. It is on that chime that the draft has been completed. Over Anzac weekend, the NFL draft was held and new faces came into the league out of the college football system that has promised so many great talents over the years. First up, the Tennessee Titans with the number 1 pick select Cam Ward, Miami. Number 2, we have a trade between the Cleveland Browns and the Jacksonville Jaguars. At number 2, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Travis Hunter, Colorado. At 3, the New York Giants select Abdul Carter, defensive end, Penn State. Number 4, the New England Patriots select Will Campbell, offensive tackle, LSU. Number 5, the Cleveland Browns select Mason Graham, defensive tackle, Michigan. This was received in the trade from Jacksonville. At number 6, the Las Vegas Raiders select Ashton Jeanty, running back, Boise State, winner of the Maxwell Award there. At number 7, Armand Membu, offensive tackle, Missouri, going to the New York Jets. Number 8, the Carolina Panthers select Terratoa McMillan, wide receiver out of Arizona. At number 9, the New Orleans Saints. It's not who we think it is. They go for an offensive tackle, Calvin Banks Jr. out of Texas, the Lombardi Award winner. At number 10, the Chicago Bears select Colston Loveland, tight end out of Michigan. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is your top 10 for this year's NFL draft. I'll go down the list and pick out some other names that shocked me as they moved up or down the list. So we're going all the way down now. We're going to go to Jalon Walker, coming in at 15 to the Atlanta Falcons out of Georgia, the Dick Butkus Award winner. Defensive end Shamar Stewart going to the Bengals at 17. Then we have the slew of defensive backs, running backs, and wide receivers. Marion Hampton going to the Chargers at 22. Very good player. I liked what he put up in college at North Carolina. Someone who I believe can really make an impact in the NFL in the running game. We keep going down. We keep going down to number 25, where the New York Giants select Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss. And that is the main picks in the 20s. Final one I want to talk about or bring up here is pick 31, Jihad Campbell, linebacker out of Alabama, going to the Philadelphia Eagles. As I said, pick 31. We'll go into the second round now. Jaden Higgins, selected by the Texans at pick 34 out of Iowa State. Keyshawn Judkins out of Ohio State goes to the Cleveland Browns, staying in the town. This was part of the trade from Jacksonville. New England Patriots select Travion Henderson, running back out of Ohio State at 38. We keep going down further and further and further. We're still waiting for Shedeur Sanders to come up. As we go down through the 40s, through the 50s, we keep going to another name who I think could have a very, very big impact in the NFL, and it is Jack Bech out of TCU, going at 58 to the Las Vegas Raiders. Out of Ole Miss at pick 61, going to the Washington Commanders, is Trey Amos. We keep going now. We're into the third round. So the third round, we start to see some different players coming up, players who jumped up and players who may have fell back a little bit more than we thought. Here we go. Houston Texans add another wide receiver, Jalen Noel out of Iowa State at pick 79. We keep going down. Savion Williams goes to the Green Bay Packers at pick 87 out of TCU. Then we go down. We go to Seattle Seahawks at 92. Jalen Milroe at 92 out of Alabama as a quarterback. Then we have the Cleveland Browns at 94, selecting Dylan Gabriel, quarterback out of Oregon. We keep going through the list we go. This is quite, it's not a very top-heavy draft class, but there's a lot of depth underneath, and this is why sort of the big boards kind of got thrown out very, very early on in the draft. At 105 to the New York Giants, we have Cam Scatterbo, a running back I was really impressed with in the college playoffs at Arizona State, coming out of the Big 12. We keep going. We have Jack Kisser, linebacker out of Notre Dame going to the Jags at 107. We keep going. Still no Shedeur Sanders through the fourth round. Trevor Etienne out of Georgia going to the Carolina Panthers at 114 in the fourth round. We keep going. There is a lot of good talent. As I said, a lot of good talent in this draft to go through. We keep going down. Jalen Lane, another player who I really liked out of Virginia Tech, going to the Commanders at 128. Malachi Moore, someone again who I thought was a very impressive player, coming to the New York Jets at 130 out of Alabama. Quincy Riley, someone who impressed me out of Louisville, going to New Orleans at 131. Jalen Royal, a good wide receiver coming out of Utah State to the Kansas City Chiefs. And we keep going down. We are now into the fifth round. And in the fifth round, we go to the final pick that I am going to bring up in the fifth round. At pick 144, the Cleveland Browns select Shedeur Sanders. So Shedeur Sanders having a very, very big slide in this draft. He was one of the top quarterback prospects in this draft going into draft weekend, but sliding all the way down to the fifth round. And again, the Cleveland Browns obviously still aren't quite sold on Shedeur, but he was still available in the fifth round, and hence why they picked up Dylan Gabriel in the third round. So we'll go back up. We'll go back to Cam Ward. I think he's a player who's going to have an immediate impact for the Tennessee Titans. They were quite shocking last year, quite embarrassing from where they were to where they fell. You know, a team who the last couple of years in and out have been right on the cusp of playoff position, making good playoff pushes. Also, Tennessee Titans having that distinction of being the team to beat Tom Brady out in New England years ago. So that's another record they can take into Tennessee. But Cam Ward now looking to right the shift after some very questionable choices down there. Will Levis obviously tried his best. Ryan Tannehill tried his best. Couldn't get it to work. So now we turn to the number one pick and we turn to Cam Ward. One pick that did shock me out of those top 10 was the Carolina Panthers using the 8th selection on Taratoa McMillan. I thought that definitely would have been a defensive pick going to Jalen Walker, who fell to 15 to the Falcons, so a division rival of the Panthers there. That's probably a big loss, not just because of the fall for Walker, but going to a division rival as well. Because, and as I always say, you know, defense is key. Defense is always key to winning a championship because, you know, most offensive teams will put up maybe 3 to 3.5 scores per game against solid competition, where the best defensive teams, again, you know, keep their opponents under that sort of that 3-score margin. So looking at a 2.5 to 3 score average there for the real strong defensive team. So we're having a trend now where you have to have, you know, high-end players defensively and offensively in the NFL. I think for a while, I think the NFL was very offense heavy, where any good offense could be any very good, any solid defense, but it's not the case anymore. So defense, definitely something that comes into play in the NFL as we turn and we come around again. But that is it for the NFL draft. We now will go to some NBA playoff second round previews.
Pulls up, three-pointer. Bang! Bang!
Before we get too deep into the second round, it's important to remember where we came from in the first round. So I'll quickly just go through all the results of the first round ties. So in the Eastern Conference, the top tie, E1 versus E8. Cleveland sweeping Miami 4-0. So easy win there for Cleveland, getting over Miami. The second one, the 4v5 matchup in the East, was Indiana versus Milwaukee. Indiana winning that one 4-1 with some great comeback efforts through a lot of the games as well. So they had dominant games and games where they come back quite hard and quite strong. So Indiana getting through there. E3 versus East third. East third versus East sixth is New York versus Detroit. New York getting over there 4-2. Pretty much every game in that series was close. In New York, the better end of the stick in most of those encounters. And the East 2 v East 7 matchup is Boston versus Orlando, with Boston winning comfortably 4-1 in the end there. So now we'll get straight into the East second round, and there is some very good ties in this one. We have, first of all, the East 1 playing the East 4 in Cleveland versus Indiana, and the second tie is the East 3 versus the East 2, where we have New York and Boston in that tie. So we'll go up to the East 1 versus East 4 tie to start with. So between Cleveland and Indiana, we have two teams who come in after very, very dominant, very, very strong on paper wins. Cleveland obviously very dominant against Miami in that. We're going running the final one by 55. Indiana has come in with some strong games and also some great closeouts and chase downs to get across the line. They're tie 4-1. So regular season, this one went the way of Indiana. Indiana had Cleveland's number for most of the year, and they played already today. So normally the international agenda is recorded on a Thursday just because of the end of the first rounds in the NHL and the NBA. We're recording this on a Monday. So the first game has been played and it went the way of Indiana. Indiana closing on a 20-10 run in crunch time in that game. So I think that Indiana are going to be very strong and very dominant in this series. I think Cleveland have to find a way to overcome the high scoring output of Indiana because they are stacked with shooters and they are stacked with scorers, and they're going to put up numbers very quickly, like we saw in Game 1 today, where within sort of 6 or 7 minutes they went from being close to cruising away with the Game 1 win. And Cleveland, I think they've been the one for a reason. I think Miami wasn't themselves. I think Miami built themselves a really strong position the first half of the year with Jimmy Butler. Now Jimmy Butler's obviously in the West with Golden State. He can't impact them. He's in his own world now, the Jimmy Heat world, as we like to know it. But Cleveland have to find a way to neutralize Indiana shooters. They did it against Miami very, very well, but Indiana just a slightly different team, slightly different makeup, slightly different scoring avenues, and I think they're going to be a very, very hard team to catch. Indiana obviously winning the first game, so I'm going to take this one in favor of the Pacers. I'm going to say the Pacers take it in 6. The second tie in the Eastern Conference is, as I said, the East 2 versus the East 3, New York versus Boston. This is a tie that could be quite interesting and quite impactful as we come down the stretch in this series. I think this one probably is going to be one that does go all the way out to 7 games, and I think that this one might favour me to say Boston just by the tiniest amount. I feel like Boston are just that tiny little bit stronger than New York. Tatum, Brown, Porzingis, White, probably, I look at it now, I say probably a little bit stronger than Brunson, Towns, Anunoby, Bridges. So again, it's going to be a very tight series. I think this is one that goes all the way to 7. But with that said, I think Boston do win this. They will start playing, I believe, tomorrow or the day after. So tight series. I think both teams could go in there and win it. They both play, their own way, very, very good in their own ways. But I think Boston, a lot of perimeter shooting options and a lot of good defensive options as well to contest against New York. So I think Boston does win this one, going over New York in 7. We'll now go straight on to the NBA Western Conference, and we will start by looking at the first round games as well. So the first tie in the Western Conference, West 1 versus West 8, OKC versus Memphis. OKC clean sweeping them, so the East 1 versus East 8 and the West 1 versus West 8 both end up in clean sweeps. So easy work for Oklahoma City. Very dominant over Memphis again, just like Cleveland were over Miami. Then we have the West 4 versus the West 5 matchup. This went with the way of the Denver Nuggets in 7 games over the Los Angeles Clippers. So they will be playing Oklahoma City in that second round tie. Then at the bottom half of the Western Conference, we have the West 3 versus West 6 and West 2 versus West 7 matchup. So the West 3 versus West 6 was the Lakers and the Minnesota Timberwolves. Minnesota winning this one comfortably in the end, 4-1 over the Los Angeles Lakers. And then in that final tie, Houston and Golden State went to 7, and Golden State earlier today pulled out the victory over Houston to go through and play Minnesota in that second round tie in the Western Conference. We'll go to OKC versus Denver. I think this is going to be this is probably going to be, along with New York and Boston, where I think we know how good that's going to be. I think this is the series where we don't know how good it's going to be. I think this series could easily go, quite heavily either way, or I think it also could easily be quite even. I think I'm going to say that it's going to be quite even throughout. Oklahoma City, my concern for them is that they don't have that genuine second shooter, a reliable second shooter. They're sort of it's sort of they got Shea, and then they sort of rotate whoever that second scorer is night in and night out. And I think, well, that has its advantages. I think that's a dangerous line to be treading in a playoff situation where, you're going to need to rely on certain guys at certain times because everyone needs to be hot in the playoffs if available. Because, if your second shooter on one night is not available, then you're probably going to lose. The next time I have to come up, he might not be ready. He'll lose, cost you the game. Not any fault of his own, but through that idea of just rotating whoever your second shooter is going to be. Denver, I like Denver a lot. They moved on from Mike Malone, and they've come out. They've got over the Clippers. They play OKC, a very dominant West one. Denver just trying to come back into the fold a little bit now. As I said, strong win over the Clippers, 4-3 in the playoffs. But I think this one, Denver go into an early off-season and have a look at himself. And I think we have Oklahoma City winning this one in 6 games. Second one is the West 6 versus West 7, Minnesota versus Golden State. And this one, again, very, very interesting tie. Minnesota and Golden State, 2 teams who I don't think, many people saw being teams who were probably down that bottom end of the Western Conference come playing time. I think Minnesota probably should have been a lot higher. I don't think Golden State was a playing team either. So, these guys are probably your 5 and 6, your real 5 and 6 in the West. They knock off the 3, they knock off the 2 in their first round games. Now they get to play each other for a shot in the Western Conference Finals, which will probably be against OKC. And that could be interesting. The Western Conference suddenly gets very interesting with this 6-7 game and OKC versus Denver, because now we have some matchups we've never seen before. But we're going to look at this series, and we need to look at it probably piece by piece. We have to look at Ant-Man versus Curry. We have to look at the pieces Minnesota's got against the pieces that Golden State's got. I think Ant-Man versus Curry is going to be one of the key battles in this series, but I think also we look at some of the other options they have, like Gobert, Randall on the T-Wolves, and Jimmy Buckets, Draymond on Golden State. So this is the tie that's going to be very interesting. Who can get those players up and about and active in the game for a very long time? I think this one probably is a tight 6 as well. So this is one where I think both teams, they're going to play hard. They're going to shoot the lights out. I think the scoring numbers are going to go up in this series with Ant-Man and Curry taking the floor. So, this could be one of the all-time series in the NBA if we get what I am predicting to happen. So this is going to be a real tight 6. And I'm going to say Golden State continue their quest for one more ring. Steph Curry was right in saying, we need to bring in a player, but we need to not blow up the team. Well, they've brought in a player. They haven't blown up the team. And I think they're an outside look for the Western Finals. I think they just go over Minnesota in 6 in this one. So that'll do it for the NBA Finals. We'll now move on to the NHL Playoffs as we look at their second round ties and the results of those first round ties as we see how we got to this point. Same as we did with the NBA, we're going to start in the Eastern Conference, and the first one was the Atlantic first place team versus the wildcard team. So that was Toronto versus Ottawa. Toronto winning that 4-2 in the end. Toronto, I think, much better team than Ottawa in the end, were, capitalised on their chances a lot better across the series and deservedly go through to the second round. Then we have Florida in the Atlantic 3 versus Atlantic 2 matchup against the Bolts, the Tampa Bay Lightning. So an old Floridian affair in that second game, or that second tie. So now we have, in that top half, we have Florida, who beat the Bolts 4-1 against the Toronto Maple Leafs in what could be a real exciting time. None of these games have been played yet. They will start tomorrow. Bottom half of the Eastern Conference was Washington versus wildcard Montreal Canadiens. Washington winning that 4-1. Very dominant, very strong win for them. Scoring goals, taking their chances when needed, much like Toronto. And then down the bottom we have the Met 2 versus Met 3 teams. Carolina 4-1. Very dominant, very powerful Carolina team this year over the New Jersey Devils in what is going to be an outstanding old Met affair. So we'll go to the top of the Eastern Conference. So Toronto versus Florida. I think the Atlantic Conference, big travel in this one. So these teams are going to be traveling up and down that coast from top to bottom. Canada to Florida in this one. So these teams will be looking to knock over it quite quickly to deal with the travel issues facing this series. I think it's going to be very tight. I think it's going to be very, Matthews versus the other Kachuk, as we like to say. Because, I saw something earlier today saying, well done, Toronto, you beat one Kachuk, you beat Brady Kachuk. Now you get to face Matthew Kachuk and the Florida Panthers, and then what could be a very, very, very entertaining series. I feel like on the ice, I just have Florida slightly ahead, even though they are the A3. I think that right now they're probably just slightly better team, just on form and on record and based on who they've got available. But Florida, will play their game. Toronto will play their game. I think that this one could be either way. I'm going to say that this one goes the way of Florida, and this is going to be Florida in 6. So we'll move down to the bottom of the Eastern Conference for Metro 1 versus Metro 2, Washington versus Carolina. And this is I'm looking at the full bracket right now, and this is far and away my favorite series in this second round. So obviously you got Ovi, Strome, and the team down there in Washington, the Caps in the capital, versus a very, very, very good Carolina Hurricanes team. So Carolina I'm going to talk about first, and they're my favourites going to this series. I think that Carolina might be able to just knock them off. They were so strong and so dominant across the ice against the Devils that it's hard to not go with them. I know that Montreal played really well as well against the Canadiens, but I just something's telling me that Carolina are getting behind. I've seen their crowds. It's everyone on their feet all night, 60 minutes. Up and down the ice, crowds are up all night in that one. So, and a lot more, I think there's a lot more potential for Carolina to get some sneaky goals than there are for Washington. I think that Washington are a team who are, they're well coached, they're well prepared. They've got Oliver Ovechkin, the greatest goal scorer of all time in the NHL. And can he continue that form? I think he's going to be a very hard check defensively for Carolina, but I think their offensive lines, their top 6, will just be that bit too good for them, and that's why I see Carolina going over in 6 games in this series. Now we'll go over to the Western Conference. So in the top of the Western Conference, it's the Central 1 versus the Wild Card. Winnipeg versus St. Louis. This one wrapped up earlier this morning. It was a 7-game series. It was a 7-game thriller. St. Louis got on the board too early, and then Winnipeg chased them down, tying it in the dying seconds with a buzzer beater to get it to overtime. No goal scored in overtime. Then we go to double overtime where Winnipeg pulled out the winner, winning that game 4-3 to win the series 4-3 overall. Then we have the other central matchup, the C2 and the C3, Dallas and Colorado. That also went to 7 games, and that was an absolute classic as well. Dallas and Colorado, 2 teams, whenever they match up against each other in the playoffs, it's going to be something special to watch. So, in the end, this one going the way of Dallas in the end. They win that 4-3. That is your top half second round game in the West. We go to the bottom, and we had some very, very good 6-gamers as well. Vegas versus Minnesota. Vegas taking care of their chances against the wild card Minnesota. The Pacific won Vegas again. Minnesota had a lot of opportunities to take that series, just couldn't keep up the offensive pressure or let in leaky goals when they didn't need them, and that's why the Vegas Golden Knights advance out of the Pacific 1's position, and they will play the team that came out of the P2, P3 game, the P3 Edmonton Oilers, who by all accounts should not be here. This should have been the series for the Los Angeles Kings, but the Edmonton Oilers dug deep and found a way back in. The Kings melted under the heat of the playoff pressure on the ice and couldn't get it over the line, and Edmonton, even after dropping the first 2, come back to win the next 4 and will play Vegas in that bottom round of the West. So Winnipeg and Dallas, this is a matchup that I think could get quite interesting. I think Dallas, Winnipeg, 2 teams who are looking to take that step to go to the conference finals again. They are both teams who are in the mix for the last couple of years, and for some reason I see Dallas taking this. I trust their defensive pairings more. I like Ottinger more as a goalkeeper. I like their top line more. I like Wyatt Johnson. I like Jamie Benn. I like I like them. I like what they're offering out there at the moment on the ice. So for that reason, I've got to put Dallas over Winnipeg, even though Winnipeg digging deep to get over the line, and they are the central one for a reason. I just feel like after the battle they had with the Blues, I just think Dallas might be slightly stronger down the stretch. So Winnipeg, I think, maybe take game one quite comfortably, backing off this win against the Blues having home ice. But then I think Dallas settles into the series and then takes control for the rest of the series. So I'll say Dallas winning this one in 6 as well, and then we go to the bottom. And I think this one, if any of them could be a 7-gamer, I think it's this one. Vegas versus Edmonton, the Pacific 1 versus the Pacific 3. I feel like this is going to be the 7-gamer if we have one this round of ties. So Vegas, Minnesota, just Vegas taking the opportunities when they got them against Minnesota and getting over the line there in a lot of close games. Most of the goals in that series were decided either by 1 goal or in overtime. So very, very, very tense hockey there for Vegas. And so they'll be ready. They'll be ready for that. They've played some deep games in the playoffs and they are ready to see what they are capable of. Then we have Edmonton, who stormed back over the Kings to take that series quite comfortably. So I'm feeling Edmonton's heat right now. They are the very, very top team. I'm looking at across the board who's left. I say Edmonton, they're the real team in form, the way they storm back over the Kings. And then on the East, I look at Carolina. So I think Edmonton takes this one. I think Edmonton will take this one in 7 just because when they are dominant, they are so dominant that they are hard to stop up there in West Canada. So that is my NHL second round predictions for you all. And that is all I have for you on this episode of the International Agenda. Thank you again for listening in. I've been your host, Aidan Barry, and I will see you in 2 weeks as we catch up on more sport from around the globe.